Officer, on transport, our second strategic transport projects review, published just 2 weeks ago, confirms that the era of catering for unconstrained growth in private car use is well and truly over. The review follows the sustainable investment hierarchy, which aims to reduce the need to travel unsustainably and prioritises making best use of enhancing existing infrastructure before investing in new capacity. Furthermore, we have set out how we will reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 in our draft route map, a truly world-leading commitment demonstrating our level of ambition in meeting Scotland's statutory targets. The Scottish Government have commissioned research exploring demand management options to discourage car use, and using the research findings we will work with local and regional partners to develop a demand management framework by 2025. We've also committed to fully decarbonising passenger rail services in Scotland by 2035, pledged at least £320 million a year by 2024-25 on active travel infrastructure, access to bikes and behaviour change. I thank the Climate Change Committee for the 2 documents published on the 7th of December, their latest annual Scottish Progress Report and their first 5-yearly review of Scotland's emissions targets set by Parliament in the 2019 Scottish Climate Change Act. The reports recognise many areas of progress and welcomes Scotland's extraordinary ambition with regards to climate change. However, we cannot ignore the fact that elements of the committee's advice make for difficult reading. It is evident that we are entering a very challenging chapter on our journey to net zero, with deep cuts to our emissions required over the course of this decade.
Pleased today to have published a draft route map setting out how we will reduce car use to help create a fairer, greener Scotland. I'm not aware of any other country in the world which is committing to such an ambitious objective. It sits within and alongside our world-leading commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030 and make Scotland a net zero nation by 2045. This commitment is informed by the research on decarbonising transport published last September. The modelling in the research makes clear that to decarbonise travel at the scale and pace needed to meet our statutory emissions targets, we must not only switch to cleaner cars, we must also reduce their overall use. In short, we need to drive down our car use.
And measures to make public transport more efficient and affordable have also been a priority, and I know Mr Simpson made mention of this in his opening remarks. Additionally, that's highlighted in our route map to reduce car use, which was published last month. That includes, though, through the provision of free bus travel under the under-22s and our fair fares review, which I think is hugely important in that regard, which will consider options for change against a background where the costs of car travel are declining and public transport costs are increasing. We are also investing record amounts in active travel, but we also need to get folk out of their cars. This is about behaviour change, Presiding Officer.
Not, or are they selective in this regard? Local authorities can choose if they want to introduce the levy and when, if they do decide that. The choices we make in this place can drive behavioural change.
Well, like, Merry Christmas. Yeah, I've got a lot of tabs open here and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about this video, but obviously given the clips that I've played there, most of them came from the start of the year, round about the same time that I made this video, funnily enough, which was the 5th of February 2022, and if I'm not mistaken, actually the clips of Jerry Go Roof and that other guy, I can't remember his name, was from before that. So this was obviously before the stuff in Ukraine came to a head, where they've now kind of got a helping hand to incentivise that behavioural change, kind of get the ball rolling. But the focus really is about behavioural change. It's a common theme these days, very consistent, really. And as I said in this video here, at the time when I covered their initial national transport strategy, as well as there was another PDF, which I've got open in a separate tab, there was something that I'd kind of clocked onto as last year had come to a close and leading into the early months of this year, where there was this consistent reference all the time to behavioural change. And I said in this video at the time that I believed that they were doing this because it was a means to, they were just going to copy and paste the rhetoric that they had been applying to the public for months, regarding changing your behaviour for your own safety to prevent you from the deadly virus, And they were going to copy and paste that rhetoric and make it applicable to all things climate change related, especially when it comes to transports. And lo and behold, there really has been an uptick in the last few days, because upon me coming across that video that I played at the very start of Michael Madison, I did a bit of digging this morning, which I probably shouldn't have done, because as I said, I've got a myriad of tabs open. But I found yet more references to this, and it does appear as if there's going to be some acceleration taking place in the coming years, especially if they wish to reach these targets. Because one thing is abundantly clear, right? The Climate Change Committee, they're the ones that provide the recommendations, and as per usual, the way that our government operate here is they just accept whatever recommendations come their way by whomever it is, because they're not a government. They don't seem to represent the people. They don't even appear to represent themselves. They don't appear to be independent people, in truth. They just literally appear to read their scripts and accept and sign off on whatever comes their way. And the Climate Change Committee, which I've got clips to show of that as well, I just don't really know the way that I'm going to go about this video, because as I said, there's so many tabs, and I really don't want to spend all day on Christmas talking about this, but it has to be brought to the public's attention by hook or by crook, really. But they make reference to the fact that irrespective of if we meet these targets or not, if we don't meet them within the acquired time, then that would mean at a later date we're going to have to double our efforts. One way or the other, we will have to meet our targets. And what is that? Well, when they talk about carbon neutrality, as far as transport's concerned, it means the end of car use. Right? Now, obviously, I've got this video up here from the start of the year, but the second PDF that I covered in this, there's something of interest that I wanted to showcase before I kind of go on to the more recent updates. So we've got the reducing car use for a healthier, fairer and greener Scotland. A route map to achieve a 20% reduction in car kilometres by 2030. Everybody's favourite time of the year, or time of the decade, I should say. But just come down briefly to show you this. So obviously I'll leave these links in the description for anybody that's not seen it. But current car use behaviour. So always talk about our behaviour. But say here that they are delighted to jointly present Scotland's draft route map to achieve a national reduction in car kilometres in order to enable healthier, fairer and more sustainable lives. The route map is published in response to the government's climate change plan update commitment to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 to meet Scotland's statutory obligations for greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2045. However, it also recognises the benefits that rethinking the way we travel can have on our individual and community health and well-being, as well as the fairness of our society and the inclusiveness of our economy. So that's so bold, brave and progressive. I wouldn't expect anything less in Rainbow Unicorn Land, of course. The land of cuckery. But it says here that the route map builds on the vision for Scotland's transport system set out in the second National Transport Strategy aimed at protecting our climate and improving our lives. However, it acknowledges that people's travel behaviours are shaped by the wider context in which they live and services they need to access. Our route map to reduce car use, therefore, includes a range of non-transport policy interventions, including the provision of good connectivity and digital access to services, the way we plan and invest in our public places, where we locate key services such as healthcare, and how we support our children and young people to make fair, healthy and sustainable travel choices from an early age. Just to conclude this little section here, it says that the route map does not eliminate all car use, right? Okay, for now. But bear in mind, carbon neutrality would imply that at some point there will be no cars on the road, because as long as there's one car on the road, then that by default renders the concept of carbon or net zero carbon redundant. Alright? We recognise that that would not be realistic or fair, especially for journeys undertaken by disabled people or in rural areas where sustainable travel options may not always be available or practical. Rather, the route map encourages all of us to reduce our over-reliance on cars wherever possible and identifies key 4 key behaviours that we want everyone in Scotland to consider each time we plan a journey. Make use of sustainable online options to reduce your need to travel. Choose local destinations to reduce the distance you travel. Switch to walking, wheeling, cycling or public transportation, of course, because realistically what this is about is rendering your ability to have access to private transportation redundant, and they can really bullshit you all day long about the practicalities of everybody driving about in electric cars. It's not feasible. It's just not. Think about it. And the reality of the matter is the vast majority of people are not going to have a car. And that's what they want. They want you to be solely reliant on public transportation, so you are rendered inept, effectively, if you wish to go where you want. And that's part of the bigger picture as well, because they don't want you going where you want. And they want you to combine a trip or share a journey to reduce the number of individual trips that you make, if car remains the only feasible option. So, they say here that they have developed a framework of sustainable travel behaviours that is applicable in both rural and urban settings, as well as for those with a variety of mobility needs. These are reducing the need to travel, such as by using online options to access goods, services, social connections. If these cannot be accessed locally in a sustainable way, living well locally by choosing local destinations, which can make it easier to switch to more sustainable modes and will reduce distances. Driven if a car is still used. Switching modes to walk, wheel, cycle or public transportation where feasible, and combining trips or sharing journeys with another person in line with prevailing public health guidance, of course. But this was more for the COVID era. We've sort of surpassed that now. But it's the same rhetoric, of course. If car use remains the only feasible option. The aim is to empower people to choose an option that fits their circumstances and travel needs, with the route map setting out the actions that they plan to take or claim that they're going to take, by hook or by crook of course, between now and 2030 to support each of these 4 behaviours. In the near term, these are predominantly actions to encourage alternative behaviours. We are, however, committed to exploring options to further discourage car use, including developing a car demand management framework based on further research into equitable options to discourage car use. Okay, so there's a lot of talk, obviously, at the moment about 15-minute neighbourhoods. There's talk of climate lockdowns. These are all things that were sort of hypothesised by people such as myself at the start of the year. And I obviously have covered the 20-minute neighbourhood concept myself on this channel, because the Scottish Government were talking about it back at the start of this year and at the end of last year, to my knowledge. If they'd spoken about it prior to that, I haven't seen it. However, that said, it's really out there in the ether now. But this was the sort of early mentions of it, where they say here, living well locally, particularly important in urban and suburban areas as well as towns and villages. Accessing goods, services and social connections locally benefits local communities and helps to revitalise communities. They want to reduce the need to travel, of course, and then they go on to say at the bottom here that reducing travel can also save time and money. Yeah, and of course, now they've got that lovely excuse to just ram up the prices now with this, if you ask me, totally conveniently timed, just like COVID though. But, artificially, I would argue, inflated price hikes. And lo and behold, the only logical conclusion to come out the other side of this to ease that pain, that financial pain that we're all forced to endure, is to ease ourselves off, or dare I say, change our behaviour away from our reliance on things such as, fossil fuels and gas, etc., and look elsewhere. It's almost, now hear me out, it's almost as if that was the plan all along. But, can save money, oh yeah, and, with the way that petrol and diesel are at present, well, let's just say, that sounds like a lovely idea, does it not? Desperate to save some money, they've got you covered. Anyway, they say down here, if I can just scroll a wee bit further, that I'm pretty sure they do mention 20-minute neighbourhoods here, actually. If not, it's in one of the other tabs that I've got open. Oh wait, I thought it was that. But here we go. So this is the wee route map that they've got going on here, right? So the broadband programme, they've got free bus travel for people aged under 2022, sorry. I thought it was for people under 2022. Fuck's sake, for people under 22. I should add as a caveat, I am not well at the moment, so yeah. But that's not really an excuse for butchering that twice in a row. However, there's it there. Place-based investment programme to support town centres and the delivery of 20-minute neighbourhoods. right? And this document came out start of the year, at bare minimum. And then, of course, they mention here the new National Planning Framework, which is, if you go on to the Scottish Government's website and you look up the National Planning Framework 4, or NPF 4 for short, it is, wow, it's just Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 on overdrive. But there's it there, obviously, the mentioned 20-minute neighbourhoods. So this is about behavioural change. And it's sort of easing you into, or it's normalising this concept because it's coming. It's coming. They also mention here as well that there's low emission zones to be introduced in Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow. And then obviously there's another one here that I find particularly odious, albeit they're all odious. Learning for Sustainability Initiative, to support whole school approaches to sustainable travel, as well as wider sustainable practices. So, yeah, another excuse. Not that they need any more at this fucking point, but another excuse nonetheless to continue to brainwash children into embracing all things sustainability. But it's for the climate, of course. Yeah. Says here, despite current data showing high levels of car use, public opinion surveys tell us that there is public support for change. In a recent survey, 73% of respondents agreed that for the sake of the environment, the new God, everyone should reduce how much they use their cars, whilst 43% agreed that they were willing to reduce the amount that they travel by car to help reduce the impact on non-existent man-made climate change, of course. You know, this mirrors the support shown in the latest report from the Scotland's Climate Assembly, which is another fucking scam, which I will come on to. I don't know if I will include this within this video that I'm recording in an hour, or if I'll just clip it separately, but the Climate Change Committee, I was watching stuff earlier on this morning from them, and one of the videos is from 2021, where they were talking openly about how the Climate Change Assembly worked. I knew that anyway, because I've said as much in videos before, but it's good just to hear it from the horse's mouth. You know, so they apparently pick these people and they're heavily vetted, so they get a wide range of opinions from across the land, right? And these people, of course, they vary in age and, you know, status of wealth, etc., etc., and even apparently, according to them, they even pick on how much they're worried about climate change. But one thing, the same way that the Children's Parliament's variation of the Citizens' Assembly that they partook in as well, they have experts that work with them and they get educated, of course, quote-unquote educated. And after they've been educated on the matter, they then conjure up recommendations that the government then pretty much accept in full, if not most, if not all. Right? It's a fucking scam, effectively. And why was there not one person at any of these assemblies that was vehemently opposed to the concept of man-made climate change? No, it's not. It never goes that way. Of course it doesn't, because the science is settled. Okay? Anyway, I just had to say that because it really infuriated me. That they say here, that the 91% of its members selected to be broadly representative of the population agreed with the recommendation that we need to provide education for all to support the transition from cars to public and active transport, so people can recognise the climate impacts and change behaviours willingly, right? Willingly being the operative word, because it's the illusion of choice temporarily for the time being. But if that doesn't work, well, they're going to have to take matters into their own hands. And it looks as if that is going to be the case, of course, given they got their wrist slapped today, or recently I should say, from the Climate Change Committee for failing the vast majority of their targets that they set themselves, and which of course every other party within Holyrood agreed upon. It's not just limited to the SNP. That said, they say here that the Climate Assembly also noted that its members support a range of actions to enable a reduction in car use, including improvements in our public transport system and economic incentives to ensure it is fair for all. Furthermore, 63% of the Assembly's members support a recommendation to phase in increased road taxes for private car use and use the revenue to subsidise public transport, explaining that this support was because our aim is to progressively decrease the number of cars on the road. Yeah, just slap tax and everything and call it fucking progressive. That's the way that the SNP love to operate, you know? Progressively decrease the number of cars on the roads, thereby reducing emissions generated in the production and use of cars. And this is consistent with other UK research, which found that the public mood on road pricing has moved on since the 2000s, and in 2021, more people support than oppose road pricing as a concept, with the majority of people agreeing that road pricing would reduce congestion and pollution. Right? So you can kind of see where this is probably going to go. And as I said, this was published before they started to piss around with petrol, diesel prices. So one could make the argument that that was part of the plan. Now, what do I know? I don't know. So I don't want to get bogged down too much on this document. As I say, I'll put it in the description if you wish to read it in full, but just this little section here as well. In order to meet the target to reduce car kilometres by 20%, people throughout Scotland must be given the opportunity and conditions to change the way they access goods, services, and social connections. Businesses, public and third sector organisations will need to support their customers, clients and workforce to make those changes. It is the role of government, in collaboration with other key stakeholders, to create a policy landscape of both transport and non-transport policies that enable sustainable travel behaviours to be adopted. Sustainable travel behaviours. Starting to sound fucking pretty damn dystopian if you ask me. Individual behaviour change happens in the context of the social and material environments in which people live. And you could argue again, just for the third time I'll mention it, that the price hikes currently, cost of living and whatnot, that's environmental factors coming into play to sort of coerce you and change your behaviour. But look, just to finish that there, it says, in which people live, and our route map sets out the interventions that will enable people to adopt better ways of living by creating a social material context where reduced car use is normal, easy, attractive and routine behaviour to adopt. Right? Yeah, but this document really just gets worse and worse and worse the more you scroll down it, as it says here that they have also made use of behavioural change theory, and they published the evidence base on what works in reducing car use, and further details of this are provided within the route map annex. Behaviour change research tells us that people are more likely to respond to messages that ask them to do desirable behaviour, rather than to avoid doing an undesirable behaviour. And this has led to develop a framework of positive, sustainable travel behaviours, and to identify a range of transports and non-transport, presumably, policies that will support people to adopt one or more of the behaviours. The behaviours have been selected to ensure that they're inclusive. There are inclusive car use reduction options that can be adopted in different geographical locations by people with different personal experiences and travel needs. And then they say here, reducing the need to travel. Right? This is one of the behaviours here. So this is using online options may be particularly important in rural or island communities. Right? Yada yada yada. But it's the same. It's just the same copy and paste from earlier on. Because it says at the bottom there, reducing travel can also save time and money. Living well locally, that's your 20-minute neighbourhood shit. And then we've got combining or sharing car trips, and we've got switching modes to walking, wheeling, cycling or public transport may be more feasible if a local destination has already been chosen. And apparently that's good for your well-being, of course, which is going to come in handy for our well-being economy when we're living our sustainable lifestyles, It's just ridiculous. And they say that transport policies will be key in supporting people to switch mode or to combine trips or share journeys where alternative modes are not available. Interventions to support people to live well locally are interlinked with those to support mode switching as walking, wheeling and cycling become more feasible in areas where goods, services and social connections are accessible. How many times do they just go in and copy and paste the same routine or rhetoric even? But nonetheless, there's another word, sustainable there. Making use of sustainable online options. Yeah. Fucking hell. Getting really bogged down in this article here, but just wanted to see if they have any references to the 20-minute neighbourhood here, or I will just move on, because when I press Control and F, it's not coming up for some reason, like that it used to on my other laptop. But interventions, they've got a rake of interventions, as I say. 44 pages here for people to have a wee gander through at their own pleasure or lack thereof. So here we go, that's exactly what I was looking for. Delivering 20-minute neighbourhoods, improved town and city centres, and a love's local culture. This will create opportunities for towns and city centres to thrive in places where people can have their everyday needs met locally within a 20-minute walk, wheel or cycle from their house, reducing emissions and encouraging active travel. Right? We will launch our Place website to provide information, tools and resources to help support the development of places and services that improve our health, well-being, prosperity and quality of life, as well as reducing inequality and protecting the environment. The town centre first principle and the 20-minute neighbourhood concept provide a simple way of conceptualising a place-based planning approach that puts the neighbourhood or community at the heart of the planning process. While most commonly associated with urban areas, the 20-minute neighbourhood approach can be adapted to be applicable to a wide range of settlement types and applied to both existing and newly designed communities.
I'm now going to move on to talk about policy progress, and we're shifting how we assess things by, as much as possible, looking at quantified indicators of progress. So Scotland's update to its climate change plan was published 2 years ago, and there have been some positive steps that have been taken since then, such as planning for heat networks and funding for local authorities to increase charging networks and so on. And there's a welcome focus on a fair and a just transition in Scotland's plans. However, our overall assessment is that policy progress is not sufficient for the rapid emissions reduction that is required in the next decade. As I showed in the last slide, a lot needs to happen, and it's not sufficient to get things on track. And a lot of our indicators of progress, and I'll go through some examples, are showing that things are not going at the required rate. Some sectors are making progress, although, as I said, not fast enough. And then others are actually really lagging. For example, agriculture, which is missing a detailed plan for low carbon farming. Okay, so I'm going to dive in now to a bit of detail and show you one of our indicators in the transport sector. So this shows electric car sales in Scotland. So things are increasing, so this is good. And the bar chart shows the battery electric vehicles in blue, and then in this sort of other mauve colour, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Both are increasing, especially the battery electric vehicles. The orange line shows Scotland's market share for all electric vehicles as a percentage. So in 2021 was just above 12%. This is increasing fast, but what you can see is it's not increasing fast enough. Scotland needs to decarbonise transport really, really fast. We're comparing here with, in this diamond here, with a benchmark in our most ambitious scenario. Scotland needs to go faster than that, as I've already shown. Like our pathway doesn't reach the 2030 target. Scotland needs to go even faster than that in all the sectors. And so what you can see is that things are not going fast enough for that. And also, compared to the UK as a whole, things are not going as fast as the UK as a whole. I'm going to stick with transport now and talk about an aim that Scotland has in its plans of reducing car kilometres by 20% on the levels that they were in 2019 by 2030. This is a really ambitious aim. It's something that we are watching closely, because it would be a great thing to achieve. So obviously the climate effects are clear, the benefits are clear. You also get co-benefits in terms of cleaner air quality, less congestion, more active travel, so the health benefits from that. But it is really, really quite a challenging thing to achieve. This chart here shows the car kilometres in billion kilometres in Scotland prior to the pandemic, increasing gradually. There was obviously a dip here during the lockdowns. But they're already rebounding, and this is 2021, and this year will have rebounded even more. And this is the target here. So this sort of rebound needs to reverse really quickly. We're talking about really rapid change that needs to happen here. And what what we don't have is a full strategy that tackles things from all angles. So also defer, sort of making private car use yet less appealing, for example. And it needs to happen right now. If we're going to get to this sort of level in 2030, changes need to be happening right now. And this is the target here. So this sort of rebound needs to reverse really quickly. We're talking about really rapid change that needs to happen here. And what we don't have is a full strategy that tackles things from all angles. So also defer, sort of making private car use yet less appealing, for example.
Making private car use, making your right to private transportation, less appealing. How are they going to do that? Well, I suppose you could use your imagination, because I posed this question when I made the video at the start of the year on this very subject. I said, what would happen, hypothetically speaking, if the vast majority of the public just never took them up on what they're trying to suggest we all have to do? Obviously, the way that they try to entice people into these concepts is by making it appear as if it's a choice. But they say themselves that But if we don't reach the intended targets by a certain date, it just means the efforts have to be doubled at a later date. So this notion of it being a choice falls by the wayside pretty quickly when you think about the long-term ramifications, or the long-term outcomes even. So again, how are they going to make it less appealing? There's only so much they can do apart from force you out your car. And as I've said, you could make the argument they've already started that process already. And these 20-minute neighbourhood ideas, they are coming in. We can all look to parts of England where there's suggestions already about these climate lockdowns. So again, it's just another copy and paste routine from the COVID era, where the tier systems were put into effect. Same principle applies, it's just for a different reason now. And of course they even reference themselves that, we were making progress at the start of the pandemic. It's not funny, the start of the pandemic. Just before that pandemic started, of course, the United Nations themselves declared their decade of action, which was this decade, meaning 2020 onwards, was our last 10 years to be able to change society and prevent the impending doom. And that obviously involves having to accelerate the transformation of our societies in order to reach and achieve and complete the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And then lo and behold, the COOF comes along, and ever since then, everything regarding behavioural change, manipulation, coercion and control have never really left the building. And you're just now seeing it becoming repackaged. They can talk about it a lot more openly now because they've been doing it for so fucking long. You know? It was one of the first things to actually come out in the papers, which I always found somewhat questionable at the time, and now it makes more sense because we're normalising the concept conditioning. You were told very early on that SAGE was a thing. You were told very early on they were using behavioural change, manipulate the public. Why? For what? A so-called pandemic that, even if it did exist, is no more deadly than fucking flu, but yet they manipulated the entirety of the population to do as they wished. Why? Has to be a reason. I believe it was conditioning. Because now you're just being told so matter-of-factly that the days of private transportation are coming to a close. Now, you can take them up on their stupid offers and, play ball. But if you don't, you're going to be forced. Because if they don't do that, then their pipe dream of a carbon-neutral society cannot come into effect. So, people just need to really look a bit more long-term into what they're saying. Just, use your noggin. Really? But aye. So this is obviously this woman here. This is the Climate Change Committee. This came out just 2 weeks ago, and she's on about behavioural change. But of course, that's all they're ever on about. It's behaviour change. It's all about control and coercion and behavioural change and manipulation, incentivisation if possible, or forceful if need be. It's up to you which way you wish to play ball on that front. But regardless, you're going to be living a sustainable lifestyle soon enough in your 20-minute little neighbourhood. But it's for the climate, of course. Well,
just to go back to that 20% car kilometre reduction target, which would be game-changing if Scotland could achieve it. A really, genuinely transformative target for a host of reasons, not just for climate. Here, what we've done is convert that 20% target to the annual reduction that would be required in car kilometres, about 3% each year. And showing you that against some evidence from past experience of policies and approaches and modelling to get to a reduction in car demand. Just to be clear, Scottish car miles are currently growing. So we would need to match, to achieve that 20% car kilometre reduction target, we'd need to match the best ever year for demand reduction in Scotland. That is a year where we had the recession impacts after the financial crisis. We'd need to beat the impacts of London's congestion charge, one of the most controversial and well thought through policies in transport of the last 20 or 30 years. And we'd need to do that in Scotland consistently for the rest of this decade. Now, you tell me, is that likely to happen? Is it likely to happen without similar policy of similar scale across Scotland? Are we doing the preparation for that kind of policy in Scotland at the moment? I think the answer to that is no. So just coming back to the overall challenge, just to wrap up, and Emily, perhaps you can move on to the last slide for this one. Scotland certainly does have some of the most stretching targets in the world, actually, for reducing emissions, for tackling climate change. That 2030 goal to cut emissions by 75% requires us to have emissions again by 2030. It took us 30 years to do the first half. We need to have them again over the next decade. Ambition like that is genuinely great, but it's only great if we can actually deliver it. We do need ambition, but I think the point for congratulations on ambitious target setting has long since passed. We need to face the reality that Scotland is now off track. It's off track for net zero by 2045. It's way off track for the 2030 goal. And those goals are law. So I'm afraid that we are in danger of having a Scottish Climate Change Act that has lost its integrity. And that's the message that we'll be bringing to parliamentarians next week when we give evidence there. Actually, it's the week after.
So it kind of brings me full circle now, almost. There's something else that I wanted to include in this as well, which was from the Climate Change Committee last year. I don't know if I'll include that in this or if I'll just clip it separately, because it's like an hour long, but it was just solely focused on behavioural change. Just an hour of these dickheads talking about it. But obviously something that man mentioned there before I paused it, he concluded by saying this is law. So again, at some point, any failed target or that we fail to reach, they're going to have to accelerate. They're going to have to, put their money where their mouth is. And of course, that's what they're now effectively saying in the Parliament. Michael Matheson says much himself, or he alluded to it anyway. That's things need to change now. So that, alongside your 20-minute neighbourhood routine, etc., things are coming in the pipeline, and it's just really a case of watching the space. But the other thing as well, I want to mention the mere idea of just simply reducing, car use by 20 kilometres, etc. That's just to sort of ease you in. Again, that's not going to achieve this pipe dream of carbon neutrality, is it? No, it's not. But he made reference to this as well. This is the second version of their National Transport Strategy Delivery Plan. And of course, this came out not that long ago, if I'm not mistaken. 2 seconds. Throughout this pandemic, quote unquote, there have been considerable changes to many people's lives. This has ranged from increased working from home, an emphasis on local walking, wheeling and cycling trips, and significant changes for our public transport networks. Simultaneously, there have been continued technological changes which have supported in transforming our cars, businesses and trains through decarbonisation. With the next 10 years being branded the decisive decade because of the imperative of acting at pace to address the non-existent man-made climate crisis and tackle social inequality. Just as the doctor ordered, that decade of action. Where they say that the decade ahead therefore presents us with convenient opportunities, just like COVID did, of course, to transform our transport system and the way we experience our roads, streets and neighbours, and in turn enhance our significant economic, human and natural resources. Okay? So bold and brave and beautiful and sweet. At the heart of their strategy is the recognition that we need to deliver a step change in behaviour and provide attractive, affordable and accessible and sustainable travel options. The action to take forward the framework is outlined in the regular delivery plans such as this. Of course, it says prioritising sustainable travel. And how do they do that? Well, you need to change your behaviour, don't you? Of course. Oops. There we go. A significant amount of ongoing work is required to develop and appraise and prioritise the interventions in our delivery plans. This work is overseen by colleagues from across the national, local and regional government. The second plan continues to support the sustainable travel hierarchy, promoting walking, cycling and public transportation as opposed to private, and bike and car ride sharing in preference to single occupation car use. We will continue to target investment in infrastructure, proactive promotion and improved coordination across all modes to achieve the necessary and generational change in behaviour. Right? Operative word there, being behaviour, right? An attitude towards transport choices. So they're going to put things into place, put things into practice. They're conjuring up their plans to coerce and manipulate and fuck around with your opinions and your attitudes, thus by extension changing your behaviour. Also, you give up your right to private transportation because of my climate change. Yeah, shit it is, yeah. encouraging demand for active travel, right, and low carbon transport options. And of course, conveniently, every single low carbon transport option, bar arguably an electric car, but then of course if you just think about how feasible that is and how they're created in the first place, yeah. But the point remains the same here. It's very convenient that every single mode of transportation, bar your car, is low carbon. In the year ahead, we will publish the National Planning Framework 4, which is, as I said, Agenda 2030 on steroids, and in doing so, work with authorities to make progress on embedding the sustainable travel and investment hierarchies into their plans and decision making. Of course. So they say that the strategy is rooted in an ambitious and exciting vision for Scotland's transport system. Right? They advocate a vision for Scotland's transport system that will help create great places, a sustainable, inclusive, safe and accessible transport system, helping deliver a healthier, fairer, and more prosperous Scotland for communities, businesses and visitors, with the strategy being for all of Scotland, recognising the different needs of our cities, towns, remote and rural areas and islands, considering why we travel and how these trips are made by including all the aforementioned. Right. So obviously time constraints now are not on my side, admittedly, but so I'm just skipping through this a bit. But as I say, I'll leave everything in the description. But the outcomes from the review address the challenges we face with regards to the global climate emergency, and tackling net zero by identifying how and where we should make changes to our transport networks that will encourage more of our shorter everyday trips to be made by walking, wheeling and cycling. Short to medium length trips to be made by public transportation, and longer trips to be made by public transport and low emission vehicles, aka anything that's not your car. These choices are built on the foundation of the sustainable investment hierarchy that focuses as firstly on reducing the need to travel unsustainably. Travel unsustainably, that's a good one, that. Maintaining and safely operating existing assets, then making better use of existing capacity, and finally targeted infrastructure improvements. By focusing on investment on sustainable transport options for individuals, families, communities and businesses, the recommendations will make it easier to access the transport networks and systems that Scotland will need to meet challenges and changes over the next 20 years. They're clear that as we transition to net zero, we are committed to doing so in a way that is fair and in accordance with the just transition principles. They then elaborate by saying that support environmentally and socially sustainable jobs. Just love throwing in that word sustainable all over the shop. Support low carbon investment in infrastructure. Develop and maintain social consensus through meaningful engagement with workers, communities, NGO businesses, industry and other relevant groups. Make all possible efforts to create decent, fair and high value work in a way that does not negatively affect the current workforce, and contribute to resource efficient and suitable economic approaches which help address poverty and inequality. Okay. The scale of transformation required through decarbonisation is unprecedented. We are working to embed the just transition principles through our policy development and actions to support the move to net zero, because the United Nations told us to. We need to make fundamental changes and pray to the gods that a volcano doesn't erupt and throw us back a few years and all that progress was all for fuck all. As China don't continue to put up coal mines and whatnot, but who am I to judge? They're allowed to do as they please, as long as little tiny Scotland, irrelevant Scotland in the grand scheme of things, stops its people driving cars, we can save the planet. We need to make fundamental changes, not only in how and why we travel, again making sort of very questionable, dark, malevolent references to the fact that in time, this is going to require you as an individual to change. Why we travel, What the fuck I want, quite frankly. You have to fucking get my car to become a write-off somehow. I shouldn't give them ideas, should I? But also in the sectors that support zero emission mobility, from energy generation and transmission through to vehicle manufacturing and energy storage solutions. Transport Scotland investing in a net zero transport system with ambitious targets to reduce transport carbon emissions and to decarbonise completely by 2045. Right, okay. Now we're just getting into fucking promises that I don't care about at this moment in time, but they say here that they are committed to reducing car kilometres by 20% by 2030, decarbonising passenger rail services by 2035 and fully decarbonising scheduled flights in Scotland by 2045. We are phasing out the need for new petrol and diesel cars and light vans as well as vehicles of all types in public sector fleets by 2030. Mission Zero creates new collaborations between Transport Scotland and partners across government, industry and academia to accelerate the development and deployment of the technologies required to meet these targets while identifying and sizing the economic opportunities that they present. And of course they then say that they will be incentivising people. So here we go again with the coercive shit. We are incentivising people and businesses to access new and used electric vehicles and deliver a publicly available charging network across the country. We're invested in innovation and developing zero emissions skills and engaging internationally, promoting our world-leading targets that we're failing exponentially on, but who am I to judge? Let's get the brag the way, boys. Our collaborative approach will help Scotland thrive in a new zero-emission economy. Dearie me. But they say here as well, that's, let me see. So we got taking climate action. We will help to deliver our net zero target by taking said climate action. We'll adapt to the effects of non-existent man-made climate change and promote greener, cleaner choices. We know that bold action is required to tackle the non-existent man-made climate emergency and reach our net zero targets. We also know that there are significant opportunities to be had in our move towards a green, sustainable and active transport system. Scotland's hosting of the 2021 conference, the COP even, has led to increased public awareness of the need to tackle non-existent man-made climate change and the responsibilities which sit across society. We need to support people and businesses to make travel and transport choices that minimise the long-term impacts on the climate and of course every single aspect of your life because of the carbon that you emit, according to these people, is a hindrance to the well-being of the planet. Right? It's fine for them to all fly to each respective COP year on year to talk about these issues when, they could quite easily use the internet or whatever. But hey ho, hey. I'm just being a conspiracy theorist, I guess. But the point remains the same though. They want to present this narrative via their bullshit that's repeated on a daily basis, and there's never any pushback because the science is settled now. But they even take it a step further by going after the children, etc. They want everybody to be off the belief that your lifestyle at present is a detriment to the planet. Therefore, you need to change. All needs to change. And eventually, with your sustainable lifestyle and your sustainable choices, you're just going to be micromanaged, completely and utterly micromanaged. Until your behaviour changes. And even then, I would probably make the case and make the argument that you're still going to be micromanaged and monitored, They say here as well that we need to support people and businesses to make travel and transport choices that minimise. Did I read that? I did. Scotland must transition to a net zero emissions economy for the benefit of our environment, our people, our communities and our future prosperity. We are continuing with our place-based approach underpinned by a commitment to a just transition to zero greenhouse gas emissions as well as to the community wealth building principles of creating benefits and opportunities equally for people across Scotland. People and businesses will be supported to make alternative travel choices that help strengthen local economies and allow everyone to share in the benefits of taking climate action while ensuring that those least able to pay are not unfairly burdened and existing inequalities are tackled, not exacerbated. Their actions, of course, they claim, will be to reduce the need to travel unsustainably, provide a sustainable transport system and create better connectivity with sustainable, smart, cleaner transport options. During the period of 2022 to 2023, they claim they're going to be taking action on the role of transport within climate change and working towards our net zero goals through the following actions. Support the transition from car use to active travel. Then they go on to talk about how cars make up 75% of total traffic volumes on our roads, right? However, a significant proportion of existing car journeys have the potential to be made in other ways. They're committed to taking action across the full range of Scottish Government policy, areas that will enable individuals and organisations to choose healthier, fairer and more sustainable travel options. They'll continue to embed and support the changes necessary to meet the commitment to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030, right? Using a framework of sustainable travel behaviours. Yeah. Oh, they're going all out, folks. Oh, fucking hell. Reducing the car use for a healthier, fairer and greener Scotland. They say here as well, it sets out the actions that we will take between now and 2030 to support each of the 4 sustainable travel behaviours, reducing the need to travel. Living well locally, switching modes and combining trips, yada yada. I mean, they do repeat themselves quite often. We will undertake further exploration of options for demand management to discourage car use, including pricing. Just let me repeat that. We will undertake further exploration of options for demand management to discourage car use, including pricing. Additional research has been commissioned which will provide a short list of options for further exploration and feasibility analysis. The aim is to develop a new car demand management framework which will take into account the needs of people in rural areas and island communities, as well as those on low incomes and people with protected characteristics. Well, if you're brown, you might need a fucking car. We will update the guidance for local transport strategies to support national climate change objectives. To do this, we will work with local authorities over the coming year to continue to ensure that the parking and local transport strategies have proper appreciation of climate change, as well as the impact on all users, including public transport operators, disabled motorists, cyclists and pedestrians. Alright?